Hello and welcome to Beyond the Scenes. My name is Andres Cuervo. Today I have another great interview with one of my friends, people in the industry, creatives, and we talk about things beyond what we do in the industry. And it's my pleasure to have my great friend, one of my best friends, Andrew Tucciarone.
Oh man, I appreciate that. I receive that completely.
Bienvenido, Andrew.
Yes, thank you for welcoming me here. I guess it's kind of like a sort of joke, mostly for us, that I pretend to know more Spanish than I actually do, and then Carlos speaks Spanish to me, and I pretend to know what he's saying most of the time.
And then I pretend to speak Italian until I go to Italy. I'm like, oh, it's not that much.
It's almost the same,
Almost the same. Yeah, the Romance language.
basically almost. Yeah.
For a long time I've been, meaning to have you here at the studio, because we share so many things in life. We work together in so many projects. I feel like it hasn't been even a decade, but it just feels like almost like another entire
Yeah.
life.
Yeah,
So
we've lived some production life together, even though it's only been a couple years. We've had some experiences for
yeah.
sure.
And that's part of like what I believe is connecting us so much, is like the things that we lived in the past and the journey that we have, and the things that we shared together. And I would like to start there. If you can share a little bit about your journey, where you're coming from. I know that we even talk about, your grandfather coming to
Yeah.
America.
Wow, take it all the way back. I am, I guess that would be second generation immigrant. So my grandfather came over from Italy. My father's full Italian, and yeah, so I have a little bit of that second generation immigrant experience in the fact that my dad was the first one to kind of like get out of the manual working with his hands kind of
Mhm.
job. And he had a kind of very basic job, which was great, but it provided a lot of stability for us that he didn't get growing up because of my grandfather's kind of World War II veteran experience. And so I got the opportunity to kind of grow up, but I experienced art growing up as kind of a extra thing. It wasn't like a job. It wasn't a lifestyle, right? It was go to college because none of us have ever gone to a 4-year college. You need to go to college. You need to get a good degree. You need to make some money because you'll be the first one. I'm the firstborn, 3 boys. It's time to go out there and make it happen. And I think that I internalized that a lot, and I shut off a lot of the parts of my brain and my soul that were connected to art. So, I played music and I did different things, but it was always like, this is a hobby,
Mm.
right? This isn't like art is what my dad does whenever he has some time off, is he plays guitar or banjo or whatever. And whenever I went to college, man, I realized that actually going to college for engineering was terrible because there's a big difference between being able to do something and then wanting to do something or having the passion for it. And I'm a very passionate person, so all through college, instead of doing great on my statics and dynamics tests, I was doing worship leading for Campus Crusade, now called
Mhm.
Crew, and yeah, just getting into music, getting into art. But I always kind of had this thought of like, I'm just going to leave it behind, because that's what you do, is you just do these things as a hobby, until I met my wife
In college.
in college, which is very crazy
Okay.
because, I was actually a sophomore whenever I met my wife, who had just recently graduated, and
Oh, she graduated.
she graduated first. Yes, I know she looks a lot younger than I do for sure. But when we met, basically she's a very passionate person, and she was kind of pursuing her passions, and one of those was photography. And I just kind of was like, you know what, I'll take some pictures, I'll help you out with this and that. And we were still doing music, so I thought, okay, I'll just learn how to do video, I'll learn how to do some audio stuff, just learn how to do these different things. But my mind was never like, oh, I'm gonna make a business out of this. And until one day, this is a crazy story, I know you haven't heard this story. I was at the lab at the sad little machine shop at Georgia Tech,
Okay.
And one of the guys in our machine shop cut his finger off on the bandsaw, like
Oh,
just cut it off, just lost his entire pinky finger and his little finger. And I know this is going to sound so dramatic, but when I saw that, I didn't actually see it happen, but when I did see like the evidence of him coming to school without a finger, I was like, I'm not willing to lose my finger for engineering. Like, this is not a career path that I will lose a finger for.
what's your wake up call?
My wake up call.
Somebody losing a finger.
Oh, I mean, it was weird, but it's like, because it's like, I mean, how often are you going to lose a finger in engineering? Probably not. But still, I was just realizing I'm unwilling to, what am I willing to give for this career? And the truth was almost nothing. So my thought was, I want to do a career where I'm willing to give everything. I want to be in a career where I don't mind actually dying for what I'm doing. And that's whenever I first started to get into art and filmmaking. It's a long and winding road, so I'm going to skip a couple of steps.
Yeah.
But I started in the audio department because that's what I knew with music. And then I slowly worked my way into documentary. And I went on my first filmmaking trip to another country in 2008. I went to Kenya. And while I was in Kenya, it was right after they had one of their mini election violence protests. And I was working for an AIDS agency while I was there. And, a lot of people, when they would go, they would have a really hard time wrapping their head around all of this is so different. I don't know what to shoot. I don't know what to see. I don't know what to think. But whenever I was there and the film that we made afterwards was just really focused, it was like the storytelling was really tight. And I had this realization that story should be first. And it's really like an editing, thing is to say, construct the story first, right? Make the radio cut, make it to where if you close your eyes and you listen to the video, it would make sense. Because then once you start adding things, it's going to be amazing. And so my sort of mantra became story first. From that, I started seeing a lot of 50-year-old camera guys who couldn't walk up a flight of stairs or were on their third shoulder surgeries. And I realized I don't want to be in a space where I have to say no to birthdays, have to say no to Christmas because we got to make some money. So I decided I want to slowly start to work my way into a situation where I have control over what I'm doing. And that was really honestly what launched me on my business journey, because I had no frame of reference for entrepreneurship. No parents, no uncles, literally no one in my family was an entrepreneur. But whenever I was in college and started getting into this thing, I went to Craigslist and I was like, hey, people are posting jobs on Craigslist. I know a video camera. I can do this job. And slowly but surely, I started to build a network from those initial jobs that then led me into creating my very first production company, which was nothing. It was me, right? But from those experiences, I grew into the creation of the company where actually, we didn't work with you when we were Story First, but that's where we really started to have some success. I brought on two amazing partners, Max Prince and David Hamilton. And with those partners, with their kind of like yin balancing some of my yang, we were able to create a team that was really focused on building amazing stories that served causes. That was kind of our whole thing, was like causes, and broader than just nonprofits. It was like any cause. Like if you have cause-based in your mission, then we're there for you. And that sometimes would look super weird, because who thinks that a bank is cause-based? But sometimes you dive into the mission focus of the people that you're working with and you realize, oh, actually, this bank is pretty cause-based and actually treats me a lot better than this supposed, nonprofit or whatever. So we started working with a lot of different clients.
Your engineer background definitely taps into part of what you do as an artist, that it's also able to organize things and think as an engineer. So it's going for school for that, or training your brain into that side also complements your artistic side of yourself.
No, I would absolutely agree. I mean, going to Georgia Tech for mechanical engineering, it's a real thing where you have to, engineers by the very definition of what they are, they're problem solvers, right? Engineering is applied science to solve problems. That's the simple definition of engineering. And that, as a filmmaker, is what we're doing. We are in many ways engineers because we take the science and then we apply it to our problem, which is the content we're trying to create, the story we're trying to tell, and we use the science and then we use the art to be able to make it happen. I mean, I tell you what, there was plenty of times whenever I was either in the field interning or in my class. Actually, one of my professors designed the 1996 torch, the Olympic torch, right?
Yeah.
And it's an engineering project, but it's also an art
piece of art,
project,
yeah.
right? So already from school, I was realizing, and of course, they're not always the same people, but any sort of problem that we're solving in the modern world is never going to be purely a engineering challenge. There's always an aspect of design in almost every problem that has to be solved. The iPhone is both one of the most impressive pieces of engineering, but also one of the most enduring pieces of art that humans have created. And so I think you're absolutely right. It's important because, having a vision and not being able to translate that vision into film because you don't understand the technical aspects of this business is going to be really frustrating for anyone. And it was frustrating for me. It's frustrating for when we first start, we know there's this gigantic gulf between what you see in your head and what you can actually technically create. And then the goal, I think, as an artist, as a technician, is to start to slowly get that gap closer and closer to where it feels like I have a vision and then that vision happens on film. So
another thing that I see is also where sometimes, we're just enclosed in this mentality of I'm a creative, and other people are the managers, and other people are the decision makers, the producers. They're so focused on the money, they're not the artist. So sometimes we disregard what they do, and then other people, like the people that are the producers, the people that are making those type of decisions, look down at the artist.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, he's such an artist.
Right.
Doesn't the starving artist mentality, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I see it in your journey, the way that you're able to intertwine those two parts.
No, I know. And I think that it's one of those things where there's a joke that, like, if you boil down every job enough, eventually it comes down to spreadsheets, right? If you boil down any job enough, like at some point you're in Excel or whatever program you use. We use Google Sheets. So, we're a G Suite family. Shout out Google. I think that for me, what I see is I learned pretty early on that you have the power. Whenever I sit down on my spreadsheet and I put a line that says props $1,000 or whatever, or locations, whatever, that is me giving myself or giving our team the power to go make something with that money, because I didn't get given something from someone telling me what to do. We, in a perfect world, this is not always the way it works, we come up with an idea of what it's going to be, then we pitch that idea, then we get to execute what's on our spreadsheet. And I actually find that some of my most creative times are whenever I'm sitting there in front of the spreadsheet and putting boxes in. I see your face, right? Like if I'm putting DP in that box, I see those numbers pop up and I see Carlos, right? And that's
everything that entails.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And everything that it entails. I know if I've got this much money, this is what we can do with this thing or that thing. I know that we can go and take a client out to an awesome dinner because I built in a percentage for surprise and delights. And to me, again, this is not something that everyone's going to have the skill set to do, but everyone should at least understand what's going into that production.
Mm.
Because if you only know your piece, I think it's going to be really rough for you, because you're always going to feel like you're at the mercy of bigger forces. And, as our production company got bigger and bigger, I was more kind of like in the management of people and the management of the whole thing and executive producing, as opposed to, the numbers. But I feel like, if you're any kind of like director, and yeah, it's really great to have a handle on the numbers, even if you just have to say to the producer, like, hey, show me the numbers. So then that way, whenever you need to make a creative decision, you won't be so frustrated, because you'll know, like, oh, there's no budget for that, we have to do this. So
Yeah, I see more and more, especially with social media and like with this democratization of filmmaking, where anybody can just, or basically anybody can buy a camera,
Yeah.
some equipment, go there, start their journey
Right.
right away.
What camera did you shoot that on? It looks so good.
Yeah, man, the camera you have.
Wow, that
amazing.
camera you have is amazing.
But uh, there's a difference of going on YouTube and learning all the skills to going to college,
Right.
whether it be for filmmaking or for engineer or so, in having a different experience. And when people ask me, hey, or young people come to me in for advice, do you think I should go to film school? I said, well, I went to film school, but not necessarily because of film school, different reasons. In my particular case, I had to go to film school because I needed a student visa
Right.
to remain in the United States. But I did get, beyond the formal training, I did get the experience of college, where I developed relationships
Right.
with people. I don't know if you consider it's the same thing for you, going to college as an opportunity to grow in your making relationships.
I think that the only thing that college did for me, two things. I'll tell you one thing.
Well, you met your wife.
Well, okay, yes, but she wasn't even going to that college, so But the two things that I'll say that I took away from Georgia Tech, from number one, I learned about how to solve problems, right? Like engineering, solving problems. I learned from a lot of smart people about how they solve problems. Number two, I learned how to be confident, because the reality of the matter is, growing up the way that I did, in this sort of like working class family that I did, I was definitely not confident. I didn't think that there was a world out there where you could go and ask to get paid what you were worth. There wasn't a world where you could go and be an entrepreneur and have money. And I think whenever I went to Georgia Tech, I looked around me and I saw these people, and then I saw alumni, and I realized, like, there is a world that is attainable, that is so much bigger than what I thought was out there. And that world can be had by working hard, making relationships, and creating something of value for the world. And that, for me, was the big value of college. Now, I think there's a lot of kids out there who, if you already have a pretty good sense of what you want to do, and you got a good way to get a nice social scene, maybe college is not the right idea for you, especially if it's not going to be a top tier college, because top tier colleges, you're going to meet top tier people.
Okay.
And honestly, man, that is one of the biggest learnings and also regrets in my young career, is I did not do a good job of building relationships early, because I was too selfish, and I thought, oh, it's just about me and what I can learn. What can I learn from these people? And even if the answer was no, a lot of times the point is not, this is not what you know, it's who you know, right?
Yeah.
You can have so many skills, but not have the right relationships, and then you can't take those skills to market. And that's one of those things that I've probably spent about the last 10 years, 5 to 10 years of my life desperately trying to correct, because I didn't do a great job when I was building my career and my team. I mean, to be fair to me, I had a wife, I had 4 kids, and we had a business. So I was putting all of my relational capital into those buckets. I was putting almost zero relational capital into friends and connections. But what happens is, that person who you meet when you're 25, you're both nothing. You're both just starting out. But when you're both 50, man, it's awesome. I really wish that I knew more of those people at Georgia Tech that I met whenever I was 22 and 23, because right now they're doing awesome and they've got businesses and I can have relationships with those people, but that's not going to happen now because I didn't begin to build those relationships early. And again, that's not to be too cynical, because it's not about how you can use people, but it is one of those things where having a network allows you to be able to take the thing that you feel like you have to offer the world and bring it into the world. And if you don't have a super broad network, so if we're going to talk to young people about going to college versus not going to college, it's like, if you can afford it, it's a great experience, but make relationships, be intentional, and you get out of it what you put into it. You know, most of what I got out of it was, you know, playing in the worship band, and going to football games, which was awesome. But, you know, not a whole lot of like long-term spiritual, financial, emotional impact from that. So.
Now that you mention the fact that almost like value nurtures confidence, and when you know the type of value that you have to offer in a project, if they say no, you don't feel like, oh no, it's about me. It's like, oh man, they missed the opportunity because I was bringing so much value to this project.
Absolutely.
You know, and then it not only gives you the confidence to say yes, but it also gives you the confidence to accept the no's, or even say no.
Say no
because
yourself.
You know
sometimes.
the type of value that you're giving. And I think so many times we could make the mistakes of not recognizing the value that we bring into a project, and then we make the compromises to try to feed, you know, and cater for somebody that understands and knows, is confident, you know. But confidence also comes from the sense of like what I bring into the table goes beyond my skill, goes beyond the equipment that I have.
No, man, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that there's a lot of talentless hacks who are very confident, who have done really great. And honestly, actually, sometimes, because we all start kind of as talentless hacks, there's a lot of people who started off with like very low talent, but very high confidence. And usually, eventually, they get to be better. And sometimes they get to be really good, because the truth of the matter is that you got to stay in the game, right? To get better, you got to stay in the game. You got to get lots of reps. And whether it's money or whether it's confidence, something has to keep you in the game for long enough to be able to get there. But I tell you, I think confidence, though, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because on the one hand, you're confident, but on the other hand, you're a diva and you're hard to work with. So I think it's like having people in your life that can keep you humble enough to understand, am I being confident and being a good leader here? Or am I just being like really difficult for everyone because I've got some sort of crazy vision that doesn't work? I mean, I don't know. You've been on set with me, so hopefully I'm usually on the confident side as opposed to the, you know.
Yeah, but sometimes clients or other people can misinterpret the confidence that you have.
Right.
Oh no, this guy is just cocky, you know.
Yeah.
But you have to value the fact that you're sure about the value, you know, that you bring. And who knows? People interpret things, you know, depending on their perception. But at the end of the day, it is just as important as making relationships or being knowledgeable about your craft. It's part of those things that we all have to develop.
I'll tell you a quick story. I got an actor punched in the face one time. So I was directing and I was being very confident, you know. Because you have to be. If you're leading a crew, especially when you're on a commercial set and it's, you know, 50 people, right? It's a lot of people, and there needs to be like a really strong, confident voice. And we were doing a project, and I had never done any stunt work before. And when we broke down the script, I didn't connect that we like were having someone throw a punch, because it was a comedy piece, right? So I had never directed someone to throw a punch before. And it was this very little mousy lady and this big buff kind of guy. And so I was thinking, just, you know, just like take a swing at him and like touch his jaw, and then he just pantomimes it, right? No, definitely not. Absolutely not the way to do that stunt. And she basically went, and he got caught in the jaw. And I mean, it didn't hurt him because he's a big dude, but he was basically like, okay, that's not going to happen again. And then pretty much like took over walking me through how to do the stunt. But after that, for the next hour, I lost so much confidence that like the freaking gaffer was giving me like points, you know? Like whenever people around, as a director that you've lost the crew, whenever everybody's got an opinion, right? Like I try to lead the crew in a way where opinions are like always allowed, but not always welcome. Like there's times when it's time to talk and, but also like there has to be some sort of like discipline. So only one person should be talking to the talent, and I'm basically going to be listening to my keys only, and all of these things. And you have the right to speak to me about this. You have the right to speak to me about that. But once you've lost the set, it's just chaos. And that to me is like a big reality check on confidence is so important, because when I am my confident self, whenever I'm leading, I could be completely churned up inside, but I have to be 100%. So there are times where I go home after a shoot and I just fall asleep at like 7:30 because having to, I don't know if you ever heard the concept of the sin eater before. Like, so in rural West Virginia and rural places, there was this concept of this person who was the sin eater for the community. So when someone would do something bad, the sin eater would come and like basically absolve them and take the sins onto himself. I mean, this is
Like the
obviously
scapegoat.
right, a scapegoat. This is obviously Jesus, right?
Right.
How we see Jesus. I'm not saying that I'm Jesus, but whenever you're a director, you literally have to be the sin eater. You have to be the person that takes all of the anxieties, all the emotions, all of the drones being crashed on the first day of the shoot, everything that's happened, bring it inside you. It's okay. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to reset the shoot. Here's how we're going to do this and make the client and the crew and everyone believe that you know what you're doing. Because if you don't, then you lose the crew.
Yeah.
So to me, that's really what confidence is all about on a set, from a leadership position. Obviously, from DP or director, a DP or a camera op, I want to see confidence in the sense of like, I believe in this shot, or I can do that better, or those kind of things, confidence, but deference. Like I can do this better if we have more time, or if we were able to change the angle a little bit, let me suggest that, right? I want that confidence because that allows me to think like, oh, because I don't think that I know all the answers. Like any good director is trying to use the human capital of the people that they have on set to build the project into being something better than it is while keeping their vision. But this is the hard part. You have to keep your vision. It has to be yours, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's not my fault, it's my responsibility. So it's all my responsibility, but it's never like anybody else's fault. It's only my fault. So I can't say, oh, I know we didn't get that, but because Carlos wanted to go shoot this, we weren't able. Like, no, you and like, who are you going to do? Throwing people under the bus? Like, no, you can't do that. So it's always your responsibility, and it's, even if it's someone else's fault. So it has to be yours. But at the same time, you have to be open to other people's idea and say, am I willing to take the consequence if we try this and it doesn't work?
Another thing that I realized in our relationship is the cultural baggage that you have to traveling to so many countries. And then one time you show me all these rings representing like the different countries that
Yeah.
you went to. And I was like, wow, awesome. How many countries have you visited? And what is the impact of opening yourself to travel, opening to cultures and
Right.
experiences outside of just here in the US?
Yeah, so I think that the current count is 40, somewhere in that range, maybe a little bit less than 40, but it's been massive, right? Like I think that one of the things that they say the best cure for ignorance or bigotry is to travel. See that someone else around the world does something different than you and they're still okay is one of the best ways to break down your feeling of superiority.
Yeah.
Because oh, I don't have the right answer or I don't know all the answers, right? I think for me, I made a really intentional decision early in my career that even if it wasn't going to pay the greatest, that I would take opportunities that really kind of like filled my desire for travel, my desire for for adventure, and gave me lots of different experiences because of the fact that I valued it so highly. I think I don't know. I mean, it's hard to kind of like really wrap up like what it means. I wrote a poem actually about travel that I turned into like a little travel reel. And, you know, I think the gist of it was basically like there's this distance between, what you think you know and what you actually know. And sometimes when you travel, you feel like you'll close that gap. But the reality is that oftentimes the gap just gets bigger. Like I'll say I've been to India 7 times, right? And I think the first time you go to India, you're like, I have no idea what's
Mhm.
going on here. And then the second time, you're like, okay, maybe I'm figure some of this out. And by the seventh time, you're like, I have no idea what is happening. I'm totally ignorant. I'm in the dark. I don't know anything. Because really, the more you travel, the more you realize what you don't know, and the more you can appreciate yourself, but also appreciate others and appreciate the way that they do things differently. So,
We've talked in the past of my experiences traveling,
yeah.
becoming Ricky Martin for a day. But what are some of those, or at least one of those experiences that you treasure or that have been really remarkable from your travels that that either is one of those things that you share or one of those things that have, really impacted your decisions
Right.
in your future?
Two experiences in India, and kind of show the dichotomy of that. So, one of the experiences, I'll tell the one that showed about the lack that they had, and then the second story is the lack that we have. So, the first story is we were in a slum in India, and it was honestly one of the worst places I've ever been to in my entire life. Just dark, oppressive, terrible. And we had just finished filming a church service that was in a building that was built with wood from crates, and it was covered by essentially like trash bags, right? So trash bags and crates for the beams. And we had just finished this church service, and we got out, and as we were walking through the slum, we smelled this just terrible, terrible thing, and looked in this pot, and it was a big boiling pot in the middle of the slum, and it was completely covered with flies, just smelling just awful. And usually when we're in the slums, I've been in enough slums to where you're just like very respectful. You just, get the shots that you need of your people. We're not making poverty porn. We're just here to serve. But I had to ask the people we were here with, like, what is this? This is one of the worst things I've ever smelled. And he said it's a pot of chicken feathers that they're boiling to be able to make a soup that they can eat, because they have so little protein in their diet that one of the only ways that they can get protein is to literally boil the feathers of the chicken to try to get the protein out of that so that they can then eat just that as a soup. And I think that it just reminded me, it all just kind of like came clear that like I have a lot of things that are difficult in my life, but none of them are as difficult as eating a bowl of soup, or even worse, having to, fill my child's belly with a bowl full of chicken feather soup. That was we have a lot, they don't have a lot. The second story from that same trip later on is we visited this village of musicians. India, it's very caste based, right? But sometimes the caste stuff that they're separated by is hilarious, where it's like, this is a village of musicians. And you're like, what? Yeah, this is a village. They're mostly just musicians. Some are on the streets, some playing this band. And we were filming a band that was singing songs to Jesus in their own language, because it had been translated to their language, Bundeli, for the first time ever. So they were singing from the Old Testament or from the New Testament, because they didn't have the Old Testament yet. They were singing songs from the New Testament, because their songwriter was literate. No one else in the band was literate. And there was this man who had to have been 65, 70 years old, who was playing, it was this metal instrument where it was like basically a piece of rebar, and he's playing it, and it's like boing, 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 and then he like lets it go and it sounds more. He's playing this, and we're interviewing him afterwards. Come to find out, he does not, actually read at all. He's not literate. And we ask him, like, why do you sometimes stand up and dance? And why do you sometimes sit down? And he was like, I stand up when the Holy Spirit tells me to stand up. And he was telling us about, his theology and what he had learned. And I think that for me was the realization that this man who's 65 years old, who has never learned to read, knows more about the Holy Spirit than I will ever know in my entire life. He has a deeper relationship with God and with the Holy Spirit than I'll ever have, because I have too much, right? I have too much, but I'll never have as much as he has. And I think that to me is like India encapsulated. It is a land where there is too much and a land where there is not enough. And, you'll have those experiences on these trips. And when you come back and someone asks, how's the trip? And you go, well, it was great. Because what do you say? How do you encapsulate all of those experiences and feelings and emotions? But yeah.